This is the way you shall be blessed from day to day. He'll be your rest. May the Lord bless and keep you. May His grace and His face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And give you peace. May the Lord bless and keep you. May His grace and His face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And give you peace. Give you peace. Give you peace. Give you peace.
As the day is getting late, don't be silent, don't be still, oh God. And the darkness overtakes as your enemies grow loud. Let the children of God come sing it out. Shine your light. We will shine your light. Illuminate the nations of creation awaits. We will shine your light. We can
going to be okay? I'll be okay, though. Okay. All right.
How you doing?
Okay. So, tomorrow?
From 1 to 6.
Okay. Well, I know some ladies are going to be here for the baby shower, but I'm going to be here, so I might wander over there. Father, we come to you once again grateful and thankful to you for all your goodness to us. And Father, we continue to appeal to you that your presence would abide with us, would stay with us and lead and direct us in everything we do, and even having a discussion and striving to answer questions and make observations. Let all of our conversation be guided by your Spirit. And we just pray, Father, that as we do this, that someone's life can be touched in some way, that somebody would say something that would be beneficial to someone who's listening, either here or through the live stream. But as I prayed this morning, we pray again that let everything that is said and every word spoken, let it sanctify your name and let it uplift the Messiah who said, I will draw all men unto myself. And so we ask this in Yeshua's name. Amen. All righty. So to begin with, as I was saying earlier today, or at least I think I said this is a Torah portion that, do I look short behind this? I feel short behind this. I got a new chair. It was like has a back on it and everything. But all of a sudden I feel like I'm, the lady driving in Florida that's just like this. No offense to you ladies that drive in Florida. Anyway, this is so much more comfortable. But okay.
I'll move the podium. You can have this to put your stuff.
Just move the podium off to one side a little bit.
Yeah, move the podium all together.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. And I'll put this there. And I'll take that there. And you're going to move that. I don't think so, no. And all of a sudden I feel tall again. It's a Hanukkah miracle. No. Shut up, Bill. All righty, what was I saying? Oh, this Torah portion. That's the one thing everybody's going to remember. This Torah portion is so rich in information, trying to go through and filter out or take out things that you feel like, I really want to talk about that. There's just something really neat about this, that, or the other. And so sometimes that is my dilemma of trying to decide what to talk about, what not to get into. So that being said, there's a lot of prophetic elements in the story of Jacob and Esau as it relates to things that are going on in the world right now. So I wouldn't be against anyone who wanted to get into those kinds of things, bringing up something that might lead us down that trail if you so desire to do. But who's going to lead us off? I usually start on this side. I'm going to start over and look on this side over here. Okay, so we're going to go over to this side. Is anybody? Yes, you want to share something? Let me turn this on.
I would like for you to talk about Isaac and the wells, the digging of the wells.
Okay. Specifically, what are you wanting to look into?
Well, I know that the well was Abraham's well,
Right.
correct? But then the Philistines came after he dug them out, and they filled them back up again.
Okay, right.
And just because there's names mentioned for each one of those.
Okay. So that's in chapter 26, right? So let me get over there. Pardon. All right, so I'm going to read, and you kind of help me out, as far as what you're wanting to get into here. Verse 26, chapter 26, verse 1, there was a famine in the land besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. That was in Genesis chapter 12. And Isaac went into Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down unto Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell you of. Sojourn in this land, I will be with you, will bless you, for unto you and to your seed I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore unto Abraham your father. And I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and will give unto your seed all these lands, and by your seed shall all of the nations of the earth bless themselves, because that Abraham hearkened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked him of his wife, and she said, She is my sister, for he feared to say, My wife, lest the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, for she is fair to look upon. And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. And Abimelech called Isaac, Behold, of a surety she's your wife, and you have said she's my sister. And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, lest I die because of her. And let's get on down here. All right. Abimelech tells anybody, if you touch this man's wife, you're going to die. Isaac sowed in that land and founded the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and grew more and more until he became very great, and he had possessions of flocks, of herds, and a great household, and the Philistines envied him. Now all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for you are mightier than we. And Isaac departed there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water, which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. And he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. And his servants digged in the valley and found there a well of Mayim Chayim, it says, of living water. So, do we continue? Okay, so let's go. And they digged another well, and they strove for that also, and he called the name of that one Sitna. Sitna. Well, that one means strife, because there was strife between him and the herdsman of Gerar. So Sitna, it means strife. And he removed from there, and he digged another well, and for that they strove not, and he called the name of it Rehoboth. So that is, Rehov is a street or an avenue. And so it's a street or avenue, but in the plural form of the word. For he said, for now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. So just off the top of my head, the idea of a street would be a wide place. So I guess he's just saying that, we're not constricted by the strife of the previous situation. So he's making a little wider place, a way that we can kind of spread out, so to speak. That's how I would look at it off the top of my head. And then he went up from there to Beersheba. And let's see. Were there any more that there was a name given to them, or was that it? So yeah, one just means strife. So he just called it strife after the fact that, we dug this well after a lot of strife. And then the other one, it's just he's acknowledging that the Creator is giving him favor and giving him room to kind of spread out. But as far as the significance of redigging those wells, I'm sure that there are other ways to look at this, but the first thing that comes to my mind is it's synonymous with, or it's parallel with, perhaps, is the better way to put it, returning to the ancient paths, going back to those ways that have been abandoned and have been forgotten. So we could make the argument that because Abraham died, the Philistines came and covered this up. The whole idea was, we want these to be forgotten. We don't want these to be utilized anymore. And so Isaac goes back, and what does he do? He digs that out again. And so he renews what his father initiated. So that, to me, that alludes to, the idea of returning to the ancient paths, which then in my mind connects to Malachi 4. Says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet for the great and dreadful day of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. So the ministry of Elijah, or the spirit of Elijah, is returning to the ancient paths, going back to those things that were important to the fathers. The verse previous to, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet, is, remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, that I gave in Horeb, with all of its statutes and judgments. So why does Elijah have to provoke the children to turn to the fathers? Because they have forgotten those things that were important to the fathers. So again, that's just kind of off the top of my head as to what the spiritual significance of that would be. But it's going back and unearthing those things that the adversary has tried to cover up. Because those things that were, those wells in this situation, they were important. Those things that Abraham did, they were important. So as the children, so to speak, we need to go back and dig those things out again that the world has tried to fill in and cover up and conceal and to hide from us and to deny us. Say that again. They want to hear what you're saying out there.
Was this just before Jacob going into the tent of Isaac?
You mean
After, right after.
to obtain the blessing?
Yes.
According to the order of the chapters, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So my thinking, because it mentions living water, so that, of course, it reminds you of Yeshua. But then this, like you said, the ancient ways was what Abraham dug out. And that in itself, going along with the teaching that you taught today about the Adamah, the ground, the dirt, the nephesh, whatever you want to call it. And so between that incident and Isaac, not realizing, because he was blind, not realizing that it was Jacob and not Esau, because he was blind, was the fact that, could it be that this was kind of a little hint that he was leaning more toward his soulish inclination, that by the time the blessing should have been given, and he should have known the character of Jacob compared to the character of Esau, that he should have known, and this was just the digging of the wells and then them covering it up again, and it having to do with the flesh and the soulish nature, that he didn't have the Spirit rising up and teaching him like he should?
I don't know that I would make that connection. At least I wouldn't without thinking about it a little while, you know. But in regard to, Isaac and the whole thing with Jacob and feigning to be Esau, there's some things that Isaac actually says that leads you to think that he's not really sure this isn't Jacob. Okay. In fact, let's read that. It's chapter 27, verse 18. And he came unto his father and said, My father, and he said, Here am I, who are you, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done according as you bid me. Arise, I pray, sit and eat of my venison, that your soul may bless me. And Isaac said unto his son, How is it that you have found it so quickly? And he said, Because the Lord your God sent me good speed. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray, that I may feel you, my son, whether you be my son Esau or not. So there's already something there going on, and it comes out the sound of the voice, He's already suspicious this wasn't Esau. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not discern him, because his hands were hairy as his brother Esau's hands, and so he blessed him. So we know he's going blind, and so sometimes that is used to speak of things spiritual, He's still a patriarch of Israel, but there's still this issue of he's feeling, and this seems like this is Jacob, but I'm going to go by what the flesh seems to be demonstrating. So there is that. But then he says in verse 24, Are you my son Esau? And he said, I am. And so he said, Bring it, and I will eat of my son's venison, that my soul may bless you. And it was brought near to him, and he did eat, and brought him wine, and he drank. So then he says, Come near, my son, and kiss me. And he came near, and he kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment. So he's still acting like, I'm not so sure about this. I'm not certain that I'm not getting played here. And he blessed him. See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. But everything on the outward convinces him to go ahead and to bless him. So yeah, I guess we could make the argument to some degree, that the blindness, the impairment physically might be indicative of I don't want to say the wrong word here, but I guess it would demonstrate that Isaac is just like the rest of us. Even though he's a patriarch of Israel, to some degree, he's just like the rest of us. He is capable, of making mistakes. But the irony of this one here is I don't think he made a mistake, because he blessed the one that was entitled to the blessing. He blessed the one that from the very beginning, from their conception, the Creator had already told his wife, it's not going to be the first one I've got my eye on, it's going to be the second one. So then we get into the idea of, did he know? Did he know? So God give you of the dew of the heaven and of the fat places of the earth and the plenty of corn and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord, bow down to you. Cursed be everyone that curses you, and blessed be everyone that blesses you. And it came to pass as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of his father Isaac, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. And he also made savory food and brought it unto his father. And he said unto his father, Let my father arise, eat of his son's venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac his father said unto, Who are you? And he said, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. And Isaac trembled greatly, which is interesting. He was overcome with some kind of an emotion here. Who is it then that has taken venison and brought it to me, and I've eaten of it before you came, and have blessed him? Yes, and he shall be blessed. And so when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceeding great and bitter cry, and said unto his father, Bless me, even me also, O my father. And he said, Your brother came with guile and has taken your blessing. Now, here's something that always jumped out at me about this. I'm being long-winded in this. He doesn't say, that rascal, I'm going to renounce this blessing and I'm going to give it to you because you're rightfully entitled to it. He says, he came and he's taken your blessing. And then that's when Esau said, Is he not rightly named Yaakov? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. Now, this is a point within the overall point here. Notice what Esau just did. He took a truth because Jacob did feign being Esau and goes in and, beguiles him, if you will, and obtains the blessing. But when's the second time? He says it's when he took away my birthright. But that's not true, is it? So here's another example of how the adversary works. He takes something that is true and he mates it with something that isn't. And that's how he uses words. That's how he sets his snare, how he sets his trap with words. He takes things that sound plausible and then he makes it into something else. All right, well, anyway. He says, He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. And he said, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, I have made him your Lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants. With corn and wine have I sustained him, and what then shall I do for you, my son? Again, was Isaac truly just blown away and, didn't have any idea what he was doing? Or was that suspicion there, and did he just kind of go with it and give Jacob that blessing knowingly? It depends on who you talk to. All right? But then think back, think ahead. Later on, Jacob, who's getting older, and his eyes are growing dim, and Joseph brings his 2 sons to him, Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh is the oldest, the firstborn. Ephraim is the secondborn. And as far as Jacob's perspective, Manasseh is on the right, and Ephraim is on the left, and Joseph is expecting, I love you. I love you. Thank you. Joseph is expecting him to bless Manasseh because he's the firstborn. You remember the story, right? What did he do? Crossed his hands, and Joseph went to interrupt him. No, you're doing it wrong. He says, I know exactly what I'm doing. So it makes me wonder if there isn't something, going on there, that even though Isaac is like, who are you? Are you really him? And this, that, and the other. You smell like Esau. You feel like Esau. You sound like Jacob. But he goes with it. It just kind of makes me wonder. Here's something else. While I'm right here, I want to do this. It's in verse 38. It says, Esau said to his father, Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and he wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, of the fat places of the earth shall be your dwelling, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by your sword you will live. That's how Esau lives, by the sword. And if you live by the sword, and you shall serve your brother. So he's not backing away from that. You shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass that when you shall break loose, that you shall shake his yoke from your neck. All right, so this is saying that it is intended that you should serve your brother. But, and I'm going to condensing this here, but if your brother ever becomes a tyrant and his yoke is on your neck, and if he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, you'll be given an opportunity to break that yoke off your neck. In other words, what he was saying, if your brother who is intended to lord over you, if he ever starts acting like you, then you'll be given an opportunity to rise up, break his yoke off your neck, which would then imply what? That Esau would put a yoke on Jacob's neck. This goes back to they're not going to get along. One's always going to be stronger than the other. If Esau is ascending, Jacob's descending, and vice versa. So then, in terms of what Esau represents, you know, the mindset, the mentality, the lifestyle, everything, and you see what's going on in the world today, who seems to be lording over who? Esau? Does everybody agree? So Esau seems to be lording over Jacob. All right, so what does that mean? That by and large, how has Jacob acted? How have God's people behaved themselves? They've indulged in that Esau-like behavior in the sense of appetites being satisfied and justifying this and that's, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, that's right. We have music stands right now. Very good. Thank you, sir. I am. That's what I'm trying to do here. All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. You're my son, even my firstborn. Thank you. So this gets into this gets into the prophetic element of things. How that right now, by and large, Esau has got his yoke or his foot on the neck of Jacob, God's people. And that's because, generally speaking, God's people have not behaved in the way they should behave, and they've acted more like Esau than they have what they've been called to do. But then in the end, what's supposed to happen? The older is going to serve the younger. So then that implies what? That Jacob is going to have to come to the realization that the only way we're going to overcome is to bow our knee, not to Esau, but to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to return to his ways, to go dig out those wells, as it were, that had been covered up and concealed, to go back and to bring out that Mayim Chaim that Abraham first, revealed. We have to go back to and Isaiah puts it this way, the wells of Yeshua, right? With joy shall you draw from the wells of Yeshua. So that's, what we're trying to do. We're trying to go back and dig those wells out and unearth all those things and those buried treasures, those things that have been concealed from us. The things that pertain to our heritage, spiritually speaking, that have been denied us. Those things that the enemy and the adversary would want to deny us. So that's what we're trying to get back into and rediscover and to drink from those wells again. See how I turned that back to your question? It was quite by accident, I assure you. Who? Oh, Nate? Okay.
Yeah, I said during the teaching how much I appreciated the Hebrew. I am a firm believer that in order for us to really get the understanding of what Abba is really trying to work or get us to become, that we have to have that understanding. And the way that you brought out Yaakov, that especially, I'd heard the teaching of the supplanter, but the way that you presented it today through the Hebrew made a whole lot more sense because it's more in line with our Father's character. And I just really appreciate the Hebrew. One of the thought processes I had today was that you see again where the wife of the patriarch is the messenger of for Yaakov, that her son, not only did he spend time with his dad, but he spent a lot of time with his mother in the home, learning the scriptures. And we think that usually the man might have been sitting there and he was sitting at Dad's feet the whole time, but which is possible, but he was probably taking care of his business. But we have Jacob, who's probably sitting at his mother's feet, learning the Torah and learning the ways of the house and finances and all these things that I see my own wife doing in our home. I'm only home so much of the time, and the kids glean so much from me. But I see that, I'm starting to see a pattern develop with how the women tend to be the messengers, kind of like the Ruach. Even in Yeshua's time, when he rose again, it wasn't the men that were there at his feet waiting for him to rise. It was the women. And then he told them. He didn't go find them and then give them the message. He told them, you go find the men and tell them what's happened. And then they received the message that they gave him. So I'm starting to see a pattern here with a very important role for our wives, for us as men. And I've learned that over the last year and a half, 2 years, that I probably should listen to her a little, especially when it comes to things of truth. Because I know in my own spirit, when she speaks truth or she speaks something, I can either refuse it and go, I'm the man, I'm supposed to know that better. Or I can go, yes, honey, when she's speaking truth. It's only been 26 years. I'm getting it, I'm figuring it out.
Well, it's been 36, and I'm still working on that too. I do think that there's probably lots of things being spoken through the fact that the Creator gives this information to Rebecca and other women that he's spoken to that way. There's probably lots of things, but one thing that I always go to when this subject comes up is that it seems to be consistent that women are more spiritually sensitive than men, generally speaking. And is it because it's supposed to be that way? I think men should be sensitive to the voice of the Creator, but then we could also make the argument that he would be sensitive to the voice of the Creator if he does more often than not listen to his wife when she's speaking the truth, because perhaps that's the way he's chosen to do it where some of us are concerned. So, I just generally believe that women are more spiritually attentive and keen and perceptive. There are exceptions to that, obviously, but I believe in general that's the way it seems to work. And I know in my own personal life, when I have asked the Father to speak very plainly to me in certain situations in my life, the way he has chosen to do it is through her. I think I told you all the story about the one time I'm like, if I need you to sit across from that desk and tell me what you think and just be playing with me. And the very next day she came and looked at me across the desk and, plowed me a new one, right? I didn't know how else to say it. That's what come into my mind. But she was speaking the truth. And I knew it was the truth, and that was the way that Father had chosen to speak to me. So men, we really need to thank the Father when he has given us a good wife. Because it is not good for man to be alone. It's not good for him to be alone even when he's married. A lot of guys are alone even though they're married because they shut their wives out. They don't listen to their wives when their wives are speaking into their lives. And that is a travesty, because I can tell you, for whatever you think this is and my part in this, I would not be here were it not for her, because she has been the Father's handiest tool in forming and shaping me into, whatever this is right now. And ultimately, he does the work, but he works through people. And so I think you're right that there is this pattern that develops all the way back at the beginning of this family history. He makes it very clear that the women have a very, very important role to play in the development of this nation. Not just giving birth to children, but giving birth to truths and concepts that need to be propagated. So thank you for bringing that out. Did you want to say something else? Oh, no, what? Did you want to say something? I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, all right. So you saw the order of things? Okay. Robert's in charge. Okay.
We were talking about husbands and wives and communication, and when I read through this initially, it used to bother me it seems that deception is promoted and blessed. But then I heard a different take on it. I don't remember if we were in Israel or where I heard it from, but you kind of alluded to it, that maybe he wasn't at all surprised, but he was acting like he was suspicious. All of this, of course, is written down, but as a husband and wife, as a couple, there's not a whole lot of things that we keep secret unless there's a need for it. So if she was revealed, or it was revealed to her, that what was going to come of her children, it doesn't make sense that she wouldn't have shared some of that with her husband. And this is my concern, and as the children grow, the parents are seeing, this one's really going down this path where this one's very interested in the family, and it was the responsibility of the eldest child to care for the parents, to care for the everything when they took over that responsibility, when the blessing was transferred. All of that to say, it didn't make sense, but it does make sense if you take it into account that both of the parents knew that they needed to give the blessing to the second one, but it wasn't socially accepted. But if it was kind of like what Hasaitan did, they took back and, kind of pulled an old switcheroo and then gave the blessing to the one that they knew was deserving of it and would take care of him. But the other one, then you said he was after blood. What would be keeping this man that's after blood from wiping out his parents and taking the blessing for himself if that's the character of who he was, versus now Jacob's got the blessing I'm not sorry, not Jacob, Esau. Yeah, Esau no, I said it right. Right.
Yeah, that was right. I understood.
So he gets the blessing, and now and then the very next thing is, we didn't get that part, but, he's got to go because he's going to come after him for the blood, but the blessing's already been transferred.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Well, and just kind of, put a cherry on top. Isaac tells Jacob, I don't want you to marry any of the daughters of the land. I want you to go to my father's family. I don't want you to choose a wife from among these. Unlike your brother Esau, who's already chosen twice from the daughters of Chet, and it grieved him and it grieved his mother. So there's nothing in the text that suggests to me that that Isaac has any regret, or remorse that, I blessed the wrong one. It seems to me that everything he says after that is going to substantiate that the one who is supposed to get the blessing has the blessing. As it relates to others in this story and deceit, again, the argument is made that Jacob is the supplanter. He's the trickster. He went and deceived his father. But read the text. Why did he go and do that? Because his mother was pushing him to do that. In fact, he even said, I don't want to be perceived as a deceiver to my father. So his heart is not to deceive. At this point, he's going in there because his mother has said, you've got to do this. Listen to me. You're going to do this. I'll take responsibility for it. So perhaps there's something that, reading between the lines that's going on between husband and wife that son doesn't know about, right? I see it, I will leave it at that. It's interesting to say the least, but nothing that happens after that do we see that is Isaac remorseful or regretting that he's done what he did. So, who was next, Robert? Margot, and then we're coming to you, okay?
So my question is about how we're supposed to feel towards Esau today, because we see them oppressing the people of God, and I don't like that. And I feel not very loving towards them. And yet we see in Deuteronomy, like, where it says we're not to abhor Esau because he's our brother. And when they went into Edom, to not take anything from the land, because God had given it to them. So, kind of what's implied there about how our feelings are supposed to be, especially today with what we see happening.
Well, let me read something first. This is in Amos chapter 9. Verse 9, for lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations, like as corn is sifted in a sieve, yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. All the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, which say the evil shall not overtake nor prevent us. In that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom, and of all the heathen which are called, or nations which are called by my name, says the Lord that does this. So, just according to the Creator's words, when he looks at Edom as a whole, on one hand, he can be saying, I'm going to bring an end to your pursuing the blood of your brother Jacob. In Obadiah, it talks about because of the violence that you've committed against your brother Jacob, I'm going to do this. By the way, that word is Hamas. Because of the Hamas against your brother Jacob, I'm going to bring judgment upon you. But here in Amos, as he's raising up the fallen tabernacle of David, we see that there is a remnant of Edom, along with other nations that are calling him, or that are called by his name, which suggests that out there amongst all those people doing all the stuff that we abhor and detest, there are people out there that he's still trying to reach their heart and redeem them from that lifestyle, that way of thinking. So I think the answer to the question is we should never look upon the things that they are doing to us and to God's people in a favorable light. We should continue to stand for justice. We should continue to stand for what is right. And as we are led and guided by the Spirit of God to fight and resist. And by fight, you understand what I mean by that. We're not waging war carnally, right? Because our warfare isn't carnal. Because there is a remnant of Edom somewhere. There is this remnant among the peoples. And the only way that... And the only way that those people see the light is for you and I to continue to be the light. So at some point, you and I have got to get over that carnal part of us that detests those things. And well, those who are carnally minded are in enmity against God. They're at war. They're in a state of war. All right. And at the same time, there is going to be, apparently, according to the prophecy, something so monumental that happens. And a lot of these people are going to have to come to the conclusion that he is the Lord, and they shall know that I am the Lord. And among those, there's going to be a remnant that is saved. There's going to be a remnant from all the different nations. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, how should we look upon them? We should detest the things they do. Just like we detest some of the things that we do when we know that we're giving into that carnal nature. We detest and we stand against those things that they do, and we fight against it where possible and within the parameters that the Messiah sets for us. Understanding that there is a remnant to be redeemed from among those. Now, yeah, can you got to get the microphone though. Oh, you got the microphone. Okay.
I think I understand where you're coming from. When I went to Iraq, I had somebody trying to kill me. A lot of people, but one particular person. After coming back from Iraq, a year later, I go back in again. Well, now they want me to hire this guy to do some relief work in the chapel. They don't have any idea that this man had a gun at my head. They have no idea. But I recognize him, okay? And I think the problem is when we see Esau, just like I'm looking at Iraqi, if I just see that as one big group to hate and destroy, I would have never learned that that man's actually a believer in Messiah, and he was left there to do what he was doing because he was threatened with the death of his family, because he's not a Muslim. And so that's why he was left there. I would have never known that if I would have just acted on my nature, okay? So, give them a chance and then we learn. And I think that's the warning here, is that we can't just, because they're of Esau, and I think that's the point you were trying to make. It doesn't mean, we can't forget the trees when we look at the forest,
Well, and just to kind of tag on to that, we mentioned, I think it was last week we mentioned this, Caleb, go do a genealogical background check on Caleb. You'll find that his lineage goes back to Esau. All right? And yet he's the one that the Creator says, of all of those that went into the land to spy out the land, Caleb has a different spirit within him. So just because you are of that lineage genetically doesn't mean you have to be the offspring of that mindset, And the opposite of that is true. Just because you're genetically born a descendant of Abraham through Jacob doesn't give you a guaranteed ticket into the kingdom. It still requires action on your part, and that is to walk and to move in faith. Okay, let me. Candace is sending a message. Say hello to Candace, everybody. Oh, she was just saying, is it possible for you to tell everyone I said hi and miss all of you? So anyway, Candace says hello. But anyway, Margot, no. Now I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm trying to figure out how the best way to answer your question. And Robert, put it very, very profoundly. Let me share another story, if I may. I have the microphone. I think I will. You remember years ago when I did the book Enmity Between the Seed? Here's how that came about. We were in Israel. This would be in 2001. It was in October of 2001. This is right after 9/11. I didn't have a very favorable opinion of a lot of people that lived in that part of the world after 9/11, right? So we had this group ready to go to Israel, and then 9/11 came, and that scared half of the people off, which meant that Beth and the kids couldn't go with me, so I ended up going by myself, so I already got a little bit of an attitude. And so one day, we were at the Garden of Gethsemane. If you've never been there, on one side of the garden, they've got this big church. If you've seen pictures of Jerusalem, it's the onion-domed church. It's the Church of St. Mary Magdalene or something like that. And some people call it the Church of All Nations. But it sits in one part of the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's where most people go, and particularly those who are making all the rounds to the Orthodox sites and the Catholic sites. But then on the other side of the road that goes up the Mount of Olives, they've got another garden that's walled off. And if you grease their palms a little bit, you can get your group into this. And it's real quiet, and it's somewhat pristine. And you got all these ancient olive trees growing there. And so it's just a real nice place to go, and, for prayer and meditation, things like that. So we had taken a group in there. And when you are in certain places in Israel, particularly the old city in Jerusalem and some of the other towns, the merchants and the peddlers, they know you're coming and they know where you're at, and word spreads just ever so quickly. So by the time we could do what we wanted to do in the garden, there's already just an army of peddlers, and they're selling anything and everything. We tell everybody that when we go, look, we'll find places to shop, but while we're here, when they start hitting you up, just tell them no, and don't Don't get into a conversation with them, because once you start having a conversation with them, that's it. So anyway, we're coming out of the garden, and this is one couple, and they may be watching today. Sam and Nadine Davis from Florida. Sweet, sweet, sweet couple. We come out, and there was this mob there waiting for us to sell us stuff. And this one guy, he was peddling coins. He probably made them the night before, but he was, selling them as, these ancient antiquities and everything. And so he's got Sam and Nadine in particular up against the wall trying to sell this stuff to them. I'm back over this way, and they're looking toward me, and he's facing them. And so we were trying to get our group on the bus, and this guy would not let them go. You know how it works, right? So over his shoulder, I'm mouthing to Nadine, "Tell him no," like that. And she's like, "What?" I was like, "Tell him no," like that. And about the time I did that, he wheels around. "What did you say to her?" And before I knew it, he was up in my face, and he was cursing me in Arabic and this, that, and the other. And then he pointed his finger in my face. And when he did that, I went, "Pop!" I said, "Get your finger out of my face, Ahmed," or whatever your name is. It just flew all over me. I went to the carnal side real fast. All right, so before I knew it, they were coming out of windows, out of doors, and I was surrounded, and they were rah, 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 rah. And I thought, I'm going to die, but at least I'm taking this guy with me right here, I'm keeping my eyes on him, and all of a sudden, why am I telling you this story? Oh, yeah. All of a sudden, our guide, Gideon Shore, he comes up and he says, Bill, do not start World War III. And he says, "You've insulted this man and this, that, and the other. This is how they make their living." I said, "Yeah, well, he stuck his finger in my face." And I said, "And where I come from, you don't stick your finger in another guy's face, or somebody's going to throw down here." So we're having this conversation, and so he's talking to this guy and trying to have this conversation with him, and all of a sudden he goes, "Go to the bus." And he starts having the conversation. He says, "Go to the bus," like that. So I start making my way to the bus, and I am hot, mad, and a little disappointed in myself, because all of these people that I took on this trip have seen the cloud in me come out, So I'm getting on the bus, and I'm thinking I'm going to have to apologize to everybody. Everyone's going to be all disappointed and awkward and ashamed. And I get on the bus, and everybody's like this. All right, here's why I told you that story. That really bothered me. It really bothered me that I despised that guy. And I was so quick to just, if I could, pal, all of those carnal emotions. And it really, really, really bugged me. To the point I was just praying, what's wrong with me? Why was I so quick to jump to that place? So one day I'm reading in Genesis chapter 3, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. And I realized that there is this, not between the person, but between what's in us and what's in others, there is that state of war, that hostility, all right? But it's not a carnal warfare. And this is what I had to, kind of go through the process of trying to understand, that there is that state of war that exists, but it doesn't mean that I'm supposed to revert to carnal tactics in order to wage that war, Now, mind you, if somebody come into my house, attack my wife and children, I'll do whatever I have to do to defend them and protect them. But when it comes to this kingdom, we are in a war, but we don't wage it with these carnal devices. So that's when I had to begin the process of trying to separate the fact that we are in war. And we do detest the things that come from the other seed and the fruit that it bears. And we want to annihilate it. But somehow or another, we have to see that individual is not necessarily what he said. We have to be able to see the trees that are within the forest, or however you put it. all right, to see that individual there. So one day, my hope is that me and that guy will meet again, and we won't be stabbing one another in the face with our fingers like this. So I don't know if that helped or not. Let's see. Okay. This is from YouTube. It says, I have a note that it was verse 39. It should actually read, behold, your dwelling shall be away from the fatness of the earth. It was intended to be a curse instead of a blessing. All right, well, that's a new one on me, so let's go back. He's talking about the blessing that Jacob pronounced upon Esau. So I'll go back over there and I'll look real quick. It's in verse 39. Behold, the fat of the places of the earth shall be your dwelling. Let's see. So that person's saying that it should say something different, that it was intended to be a curse by saying away from the fatness of the earth. All I will say is that in response to that, I don't see anything here in the Hebrew text that suggests that.
Dad, I think they were asking, not saying. They were asking.
They're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see that. I don't see that it's inferring that his dwelling would be away from the fatness of the earth. There's nothing in the Hebrew text that I can see, that I can discern, that says anything about that. No, it just says, behold, your fatness of the earth is where you'll live, or where you'll exist. So anyway, I don't know what else to say to that. I don't see it myself. Okay. Anyone else? Oh yes, that's right. We were going to come to you.
To go back to the matriarchs, one of the guidelines that I've learned through the years is that all the matriarchs, and that includes like Rahab and Tamar and people and ladies like that, was that they had a love of the people, spiritually Israel and physically Israel. But they had also a love of the land of Israel, and they were always obedient to the covenant. And so I think that it is a beautiful guideline for us today, that we have a love for the land, the people, and the covenant. And that, as you taught today, there was Cain and Abel, there was Ishmael and Isaac, and then Jacob and Esau. And it was always the second born that was chosen. And I think that they knew that, and because from the beginning of time, they were taught that through their fathers.
Well, I'll go back to what I was sharing that Brad Scott had enlightened me with, and that is that, we think of the firstborn in terms of the one that man puts his seed into, but the Father never. The Father's kingdom is not about flesh and blood. It's not carnal. And so his kingdom is going to be built of those that are considered firstborn because he put his seed in them, his word. And, when I heard that for the first time, it just really, it kind of opened up a whole new world in my thinking and the scope. And in fact, going back to that book I wrote called Enmity Between the Seed, one of the things that was bothering me about that whole thing is thinking, there's something I'm not seeing here. There's something that's missing. And then when I heard Brad talk about the principle of the seed, how the seed is the word and it propagates the good fruit, and there's only one good seed and then there's everything else. That was, to me, the missing point, the missing piece of the puzzle that just opened up this, like I said, this whole new world of looking at the scripture. So when it comes to this, the firstborn, again, are the ones that he puts his seed in. That's why Israel, he says, is my son, even my firstborn, because he puts his seed, his word into it. It goes back to Abraham, lech lecha, go to a place that I will show you. And Abraham heard those words, he received those words, and he acted upon those words. And then in Genesis 18, the Creator says, I know Abraham. I know he's going to teach his children and his household my ways. He's going to propagate that seed. So, and on down the line. Who's next, Robert? Howard?
There it goes. Okay. This whole thing about Esau, first of all, I just wanted to recommend a book that I read a while back called Esau Rising about this. I can't remember who wrote it, though. You'll have to look it up. But Esau's reaction when he found out about the blessing, and you can elaborate on this and see, so I can see what you think about it. His reaction reveals his personality, his thinking, where he's prone to violence and anger. And even when that got revealed to Rebekah, she doesn't confront Esau about it herself and get in his face and tell him to calm down. Instead, she runs to Jacob and tells him to get out of Dodge. And so also when it makes me think, and this is what I really wanted you to see what your thoughts are on, is it said in verse 33, then Isaac trembled violently and said, who was he then that hunted game and brought it to me? It's easy for me to think that Isaac's reaction was exaggerated for Esau's sake, and that maybe Isaac himself was afraid of Esau's anger and violence.
That's where I was going to go with.
Okay.
That, because I've wondered about that. Now let's everybody keep in mind some of these things we're speculating here. This is conjecture to a certain degree, because none of us were there, and so we can only go by what we see. But I think everyone here, or most everyone I'm looking at, has been at this long enough to know that there are things that are hinted at, in the words that are chosen. So I've wondered if it's the violent shaking is realizing, I wonder how he's about to respond. How is he going to react? Which then feeds my fire when it comes to thinking that Esau is this person who feigns being one thing, but in reality is another. And it seems to me that every parent knows their children. We can be disconnected from some things they get involved with, and we're like, oh, I didn't know that. But the essence of who they are, we know our children. Would you agree with that? Okay, because we've seen them kind of coming up. You're disagreeing with that. She doesn't know you. She's going to slap you in just a minute. So anyway, going back to this, it kind of makes me wonder, Howard, if him knowing Esau in this way, if that isn't playing a role in this violent shaking and thinking, oh boy, because he's an older man, he's blind, does that factor into why Rebekah doesn't go and confront him directly? At least it's not recorded. She goes to Jacob, and this is Bill's paraphrase. Your brother found out about what you did, so you need to get out of town and just go hang out at my family's house. And when his anger dies down, then I'll call for you. We'll all come back. We'll have a happy Thanksgiving. The problem is his anger never ebbed. In fact, I believe it's in Amos chapter 1. It talks about how his anger and his hatred toward Jacob is perpetual. It didn't die with the guy Esau. It's been perpetuated. It's been propagated. Even today. Well, everybody's heard the name Amalek, right? Amalek is the one when Israel was coming out of Egypt. The people who were elderly, the people who were weary, the people who were sickly were kind of at the end of the column. And so Amalek is the tribe that came out of the hills to attack Israel in the rear, to attack those that were weaker than the others and any stragglers there may have been. And when that happened, the Creator says, I'm declaring war on Amalek. As long as there is an earth, I'm at war with Amalek. Well, here's the other part of that that's important. Amalek is a grandson of Esau through a concubine that Esau had. Timnah, I think was her name. And so when he was with his concubine, the end result is Amalek. And Amalek is a direct descendant of Esau. Later on in Persia, when the Jews are in Persia and Haman rises up and he wants to destroy all the Jews, it tells us that he was an Agagite. And the Agagites were the royal lineage of Amalek. So he is a direct descendant of Amalek, consequently of Esau. So there is this perpetual hatred. It's violent. And so if you know someone in their very core is violent, might you be a little intimidated if you're in a vulnerable position, if you're about to tell them something that's going to really tick them off? It's very interesting. Again, we're speculating here, but it is kind of interesting to consider.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Or someone. Who's got the mic? Okay, Willard?
Several characters come to mind, and one was Jezebel when she threatened Elijah after he had called down fire from heaven and destroyed the prophets of Baal, 250. Still, when he heard the declaration or decree of Jezebel, he feared and he fled for his life.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the New Testament, we have Saul, which led the mob to kill Stephen. And they laid their coats at his feet. He was the lead man, Saul was. Yet Stephen prayed for, God forgive them. He prayed for forgiveness for all of them. And of course, later, Saul became Paul. Mm-hmm. And he was chiefest of sinners. And I also remember in the Old Testament, they would call down fire. Sometimes a bear would come out in the woods and devour people that would insult a prophet. But in the New Covenant, when the disciples said, should we call down fire from heaven? Should we? Then Jesus said, you know not what spirit you're of. And so something changed. And then, of course, one of the great teachings of Christ is to love your enemies and pray for those who despitefully use you. And also rejoice when you're persecuted for my name's sake and men say all manner of evil against you. And also a key verse also is adding to that is that the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. And that verse was given to religious people. And also to give no place to the devil, let not the sun go down your wrath, and give no place to Satan.
Well, and I would say that verse addresses an issue that you just raised. So I don't think anything changed. The difference is this, that the Messiah is saying to those disciples, they're wanting to take an offense on his behalf, and they're wanting to call fire down on heaven. It's one thing when, the Creator says, okay, you've crossed a line because vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So because he's the only just judge. He's the only one who is authorized or just enough to make those kinds of decisions. It shouldn't be left in our hands and shouldn't be left in our decision-making process. And so that, to me, is the distinction between what happened in the Tanakh and what happened in Luke's gospel. It's that he says, no, you don't know what kind of spirit you're of, because I'm here not to destroy men's lives. I'm here to save men's lives. And apparently what they had done was not worthy of calling fire down on them. So I don't think that anything changes between the Tanakh, or the so-called Old Testament, and the New Testament. And by the way, let me go ahead and make this statement so everybody understands where I'm at in this. I despise the term Old Testament. And here's why. Because in our culture, old means antiquated, done away with, we have no more need for it. New in our culture says, oh, this is brand new, right out of the package. We've never seen this before. And the reality is, no, it's something that the Messiah renewed. He renewed those things that had been buried, those wells that had been filled in and covered up. So the Messiah says, I'm going to renew those things, because when is the Lamb slain? Before the foundation of the world, before any of those things, any of those other covenants were ever given to Adam, to Noah, to Abraham, to Moses, the Lamb is slain. So I don't see it as, quote, old and new, and God used to do this over here, and now he does this over here. No, it's the Messiah revealed those things, the heart of those things, the essence of those things that were first introduced over here in the Hebrew Scriptures that men made a religion out of. And that's why he said, look, whatever those guys, those Pharisees say, that's what you're supposed to do. But just don't follow their example because they say and don't do. He says, what I'm here to do is to show you the heart of this. I didn't come to negate the Torah or the prophets, to dismiss the so-called Old Testament, but I have come to fulfill. And that Hebrew, thinking in Hebrew, the term would be, I got this board out here, let's go ahead and use it, and I can't get this pencil out. All right, I'm just going to use my finger. No, that's a mem, sorry. Malay. That would be the Hebrew word that means to fill up or to fulfill, but it also means to complete. So the idea here is he was saying those things that were quote unquote old, don't think I've come to dismiss them, do away with them, abolish them. No, I have not come to do that. He says that very plainly. I have come to make them full of meaning. I've come to make them complete, which is to say, to reveal the heart of these things that the Creator was saying. So, not to get long-winded here, I just want to make the point that I don't believe that anything changed in terms of the Creator. I am the Lord, I change not. Yeshua the Messiah is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So he doesn't change, he's constant. What has changed from going from the Tanakh, so over here to the Brit Chadashah, the renewed covenant, is the Messiah has pulled back things that man didn't see before to reveal the essence and the core of what the Creator was saying in all those instructions and things. So, I've kind of got long-winded here, but it's one thing for the Creator to send fire down people who are offending the prophet. Because really, when they're offending the prophet and they're mocking the prophet, they're mocking him. Right? So, vengeance is mine. But when the Messiah has his eye on Jerusalem to go up to do the very thing the Father has sent him to do, and so people are getting offended over here, and his disciples are ready to call fire down on them and consume them, they're missing the whole point of what he is about to do. Because, I would argue, that if they had been able to do that, they would have mocked the very reason he was going up to Jerusalem. Because he was going up to save men's lives and not destroy them. I want to read this. This has been up here on the board for a little while. This is kind of nifty. I can do this now. It says, does Esau represent carnal Christians? Well, I think that, yeah. I mean, but not exclusively carnal Christians. The point here would be that carnal Christians are people who are not following the Messiah faithfully. They're giving into their carnal views and carnal ways and habits and traits, and they're starting to act more like Esau rather than Jacob or Israel, if you will. But to say that it's exclusively representing carnal Christians, I wouldn't say that. It's representing those who are defiant toward God's ways, period. And so the reality here is that if Esau is lording over God's people, it's because God's people have started to act just like that. Please excuse me for the off-topic question, but it's very important to me now as I'm about to stop wearing my... Please give your view. That's a question I might come back to later because it is off topic and it'll get a little long-winded, so I'm going to try to stay on topic for just a moment. Okay, is Esau Edomite Christianity today that refuses to obey the Torah? I just kind of addressed that. I don't think that Christians who are wayward are exclusively represented by Esau. It's anyone who is at war with God's ways and his purpose. All right. Isaac's blessings over Jacob and Esau confused because his first blessing over Jacob, when he thought it was Esau, does not sound like the blessing over the firstborn. However, Isaac's blessing over Jacob, when he was leaving to Padan Aram, does. Maybe Isaac knew all along. Well, that's some of the things that we were just, discussing. The possibility that maybe he was a little more intuitive about what was going on than what we think. Again, we're speculating. So, anyone else? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Is your mic back on?
A story that comes to mind was a testimony of a man that was stationed in another country, which I don't remember. And he was a sinner in the military, stationed in another country. I think it's Philippines. But a missionary or a preacher come by and knocked on his door to tell him about the love of Christ and the gospel. But he grabbed a hammer and chased that preacher down the road, literally. But later on, several years later, he got saved, the man that actually chased the preacher down the road. And he come actually to Lee College years ago and run into the man that actually, he ran into the preacher that he'd chased down the road. And they met up and he recognized him. He said, "You recognize me?" And the preacher said, "No." He said, "Well, I'm the man that chased you down the road with a hammer." And that man, that preacher that knocked on the door said, "Well, from that day forth, I kept your face in my mind, and I prayed for your salvation and prayed for you and blessed you from then on." And many times in my life when I've been threatened by violence, because that's happened pretty often from childhood on, physically my face has been put in the physical ground. I've been bullied all my life, even by preachers and people in church. And so it's not a victim game. I'm just stating the facts. But when a person really comes in my face and really ready to beat me up, that face stays in my mind. And in Christ, not in my flesh, but in Christ, I pray for them. And of course, then it's up to God. It's up to God. God knows how determined and how much of an enemy he is of God. He just may be a fleshly person. He may just be a backslidden person. He may just be a carnal preacher or pastor. The thing is when anger comes against us, if we will actually obey Christ, according to the divine nature in us, if we'll love people and pray for our enemies and pray for those that despiteful you, then God is able to turn that around. And many times those people are our assignment. And so every person that opposes me with anger, especially religious people, they become my assignment in prayer, to bless them and love them and allow God's anointing to work a miracle.
Well, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that that really bothered me, what happened to me in Israel that time, because it was like, what's the issue in me, and why did I want to jump into that carnal way of thinking so quickly? Which has kind of led me, you've heard me say it many, many times here. I believe the most challenging commandment in all of Scripture is love your neighbor as yourself. I think that's the hardest one in there. And one of the reasons that I think that is because we are told to love God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Well, I can say that and I can profess that, and you may just have to take me at my word. But if I say I'm going to love my neighbor as myself, we have neighbors around us, and we're going to have to put that into action. We're going to have to demonstrate that. So I do believe that that there are people who are brought into our life that rub us the wrong way. Was it at Sukkot that we were talking about how the Father often uses opposites of us, whether it's husband and wife or opposites, he brings opposites into our life, not for us to see how opposite they are, but for them to be used to bring about a positive response in our life, something the Father wants to do in our life to fashion and form us into His image. So I agree with that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm kind of reflecting on the Father's humor. I was going to ask a question based upon what Robert, William, and Margot and you have all said, because 2 months ago I was going through this struggle. I had prayed the Father show me in what area I can grow. And there was a preacher or teacher that instructed that you don't have to like everybody, but you have to love everyone. So I kind of used that as an excuse to not like people. There are some people that just rub me the wrong way. And sometimes I just don't want to people. And so I'll avoid people, or I'll avoid the people that rub me the wrong way. So then the Father was convicting me. I don't know why he does this to me. That he started convicting me about the people that I didn't like. Now, the revelation to me was I'm to be like my Messiah. In order to become part of the bride, to be equivalent with him, I need to be like him. Now, if the Messiah was over there looking at me and he didn't like me, how would that affect me? So if I'm to be like him, what kind of excuse can I say? I mean, what legitimate excuse can I use? Oh, I just don't like that person. Well, if I'm to be like him, I better figure out what I do like in that person and change my perspective, because otherwise I'm going to be having the spirit of Esau, and I'm going to excuse myself because I'm this type of personality, and it becomes a problem. So my question, when that guy was in your face, when you're in that very moment where you're like, oh, I love you, but I'm going to go to the bathroom now and pray for people. But I don't know how to really walk that out. How do I find something about them that I like? Or when you're in that position where somebody just irritates you, you want to act in your Esau flesh, but you know that you need to be like Messiah.
Well, I'll get back to you on that when I figure it out. No. No. Going back that event, that particular situation, it never really dawned on me until much, much, much later that, what's in me or what's not in me, maybe that's the question, and that would have allowed me to just jump to that. You and I are a lot alike in some ways, and that it is my nature. If I just went with my nature, my tendency, if I don't like you, I don't want to be around you. I'll be cordial. I'll be, I'll smile. Hi, how are you doing? Good to see you. Oh, somebody's calling me over here. I get it. And I have said kind of tongue-in-cheek in times past, but there's always a little bit of truth with the jest. I'm not a people person, Now, what I have been going through for years is, not being a people person and the Father putting me in a position to interact with people, okay? So it's like, throwing the gauntlet down, Bill, you're going to do this. And so for many, many years, I got around it kind of by going out and visiting people, speaking to their congregation, and then leaving. All right, so now I'm in a situation, he's not going to let me do that anymore, okay? And so I'm going to engage some of the same people, week after week, sometimes several days in the week. What I'm trying to say here is I get it, and I'm in some ways in the same boat. So what I have discovered is this. There is no magic formula. There is no prescription. There is no checklist I can go down so that I can find what it is in that person that I don't particularly care for, but I'm going to find something to love in them. I don't think there is anything that exists like that. Here is the missing part of it to me. This is in my life, is that I have to empty my life of myself and what I think and what my opinions are and this, that, and the other, not to make way for whatever goes, but so that more of his presence and spirit can come into my life. Because when I can see you through his eyes and you can see me through his eyes, then we don't pick one another apart nearly as much. You know, and even though it is almost sounds cliche at this point to say, but if we keep our eyes on him, the author and the finisher of our faith, if my eyes are on him, then I'm less likely to be analyzing your life to find what I don't like about it. Because everybody in this room, if we stayed here, a long time, we would eventually find things about one another we don't particularly like. But when we come here and his presence is here and in us, then I think that's what enables us to love somebody that maybe we don't really particularly care for their personality or how they conduct themselves or how caustic they come across as being or what have you. Is when we start to see that person through his eyes, which goes back, to things that Robert was alluding to, as you said. So that's been the critical issue for me. Is realizing that I probably, when I'm that way or in that train of thought, it's when I'm all into me. I'm all into my emotions. I'm all into my feelings. I'm all into what I think is important, whatever the day is, And I don't want to come across as saying that those things aren't important. It's just that we're people who are called to put our desires and our will and our agendas behind his and to put his ahead of ours. And his agenda is always about relationships with people, displaying love and consideration and kindness, even if I don't like them. And there's people that I don't like, but I have to find a way to look at them and to engage them in a way that's pleasing to him until I can overcome whatever that is in me, that's been that's been problematic where relationships are concerned. And I hope I'm not talking in circles here, but to me, it's impossible to love my neighbor as myself if I'm not filled with his presence and his spirit. I can't do it. So, let me, I saw some hands, but I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that are coming up here. I do a Jacob flee when my mother gets mad because I keep the Torah. I spend too much time in the wilderness. Is this proper? Having not met your mother, I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know that I can answer that question. I think that to the best of your ability, I don't know ages here or anything like that, but to the best of my ability, I think, we need to respect those relationships in our life that we are to be subject to up until a certain degree. At the same time, we need to be obedient to our Father. But I guess it would really depend on what you mean by flee. I would like a little more information there before I get too dogmatic. All right, so who's next, Robert? Nate?
I just wanted to maybe bring some insight to that last discussion. I think it was yesterday, one of our new employees, a young lady, about 22, was over by our station just in tears. And I said, everything okay? And I'm in charge there, so I try to make sure that everything's going smoothly. And she was confronted with, if you've ever worked in the medical field, especially with nurses are very strong personalities. Some of them maybe not so much. And she was just young, wasn't used to being around very gruff, straightforward, dogmatic, and she's new to this. And she was like, I just don't know how you can be so nice all the time. I just want to go over there and rip her throat out or whatever. So, and she was complimenting me on how I deal with drug addicts and people who are just mean or whatever. And she asked me, how do you do it? And I was thinking, I don't want to give her too much of a spiritual answer because I'm not sure she's ready for that. But I thought about that. But the first answer that I gave her was, well, when I look at people, the behavior can be despicable, but people are not. And how do I know as a human being if I had grew up the exact same way that that person did and gone through the same experiences, that I wouldn't be behaving and doing the same things that they are? Thankfully, our Father hadn't allowed me to do that, so I have a different place. But I need to look at them as if I am them. And if I can do that, then I can learn to forgive them, and I can work with that. And then she received that. And then she came back, and I said, I got to give you the other side of that too, is that it's only by the Spirit of my King that he allows me to go through this test every day, that I'm going to test you, to try you, to see if it's within your heart, to keep my commandments. And one of those commandments is to love your neighbor. And that's how I try to make it through every day with how I look at our brothers, because if I was an Arab, if I was raised over there and had the same life that they did, I would probably be doing the exact same thing. So, but by Abba's mercy, he's allowed me to have the life that I live, and therefore I need to take that fruit and use it to the fullness.
Well, and that's why I wanted to bring out earlier, there is a remnant among all those nations that we kind of over here don't have the highest regard for. There is a remnant that he's got his eye. I mean, I hear every day, and I've got a friend who travels to countries in the Middle East and visits some of these underground congregations and churches that are going on in Iran and Iraq and some other places. And every day I hear how not only are more and more of these people coming to faith in the Messiah, and I'm not just talking about, the mainstream Christian version, but there's some of the largest groups over there are what we would call, I guess, Messianic. And that they're singing the Shema, and they're keeping the feast. Now they have to do all this underground. They have to do this, behind locked doors. But these things are happening in those places, in Iran, in Iraq, in all these places in the Middle East. And even I'm hearing even in Saudi Arabia. So the Father's heart is for all of those people, whatever nationality, whatever background they come from. And it's just like you were saying. If you and I had been born in that situation, in that an environment, who's to say we wouldn't be someone that would be violent in that regard? I didn't come to that conclusion overnight, and I didn't, it certainly wasn't when I was on that particular trip in Israel. But that's kind of what sparked that way of thinking for me. I wanted to share this too. Take it for what it's worth, but this same friend is sharing testimonies of some of these people in these countries who are being visited by someone who introduces himself as Yeshua. Now, again, take that for what it's worth. But if that's true, I mean, that just is overwhelming to me, how much his love and consideration, knowing that these people are not blessed in the way that you and I are, that we can meet freely here. Nobody's going to threaten us for coming here today. Nobody's going to threaten us if we decide to serve him, not in the way these people will be. These people are taking their lives in their own hands by just getting together. And I don't know for certain. It's just amazing to me that there are more and more reports that there are people in these nations that are testifying that there is someone who is visiting them and introducing himself in this way, and that's how many of them are coming to faith. And that, if that's true, and I wouldn't put it past him, but if that's true, it just shows you where his heart is on all of this. And if that's what his heart is, that's what my heart needs to be too. I need to look beyond the actions and the attitudes, and I need to see that there's somebody in there that was a child, that he breathed the breath of life into them just as certainly he breathed the breath of life into me, and there's something of value in there. And that might be that person, as the brother said, that might be my assignment. That might be the opposite that has been interjected in my life, to not only be an example to them, but to continue to learn and to grow and to mature so that I can be the image of the Messiah. Okay, the question comes up of when Yeshua was rubbed the wrong way by the money changers in the temple. Boy, was he mad. Yeah, he was so mad that he took the time to fashion a whip and chase them out. And I'm assuming the question is raised because there are times, obviously, that righteous anger is allowed. But here's the thing. It wasn't that he was offended for his own sake. He was offended for his Father's house. Because my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. But what did he say? You've made it a den of thieves. So why did he take up the whip? Because they were profaning what was holy. They were behaving like Esau. They were taking what was holy and sacred and then polluting it with these things that were common and relatively profane. So, yeah, there are times that there is righteous anger, and it's merited. I just wouldn't use that as an excuse to go chasing people with the whip. But anyway, all right, it's 5. Did we have one? Margot, did you have your oh, Dana? Okay, I'm sorry. Let's do this, and then we're going to kind of start winding it down here. All right, Dana.
I'll just share vulnerably for a second. We have been going through some issues with my extended family, and I can say this because I know they're not watching online, but and now our son is with them, and so it's been very hard because it's like our own son, I feel like, is in the enemy's camp in a sense because they're really coming against us for what we believe and the way that they've seen us making some changes in our faith. And it was really amazing because on Thanksgiving they all got together, in Atlanta. And we weren't invited. And it was hard because my feelings were hurt, to be quite honest. And then they called us. We were going to call them and wish them a happy Thanksgiving, but they beat us to it. And when they called, I'm on speakerphone, and it's against my whole family. But I'm just telling you, it was the love of God, because we were just, I called out individual people and told them how much I loved them and was grateful for them. And one of the people in my family texted me when we got off the phone and just started saying some very hurtful things. And I was like, Father, how do you want me to respond to this? Because I want to respond in my flesh and say that's not the truth. But obviously, their perceived reality is that there was some truth in it. And so I just said, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way, because that's not how I ever intended to make you feel. And it was amazing because not 5 minutes later, this person actually called me and said, thank you so much for that text. And they were crying. And it just showed me, like Proverbs 25, where it says a gentle answer can break a bone. And it was a very hard heart, but the Father gave me just a gracious way to come up underneath what they were saying. And I guess I bring all this back to, I was studying the word pictures of the word shalom this week, and how it's the peace that destroys the authority that establishes chaos. And if you already referenced the scripture today, forgive me, because we were watching live stream earlier. But in Romans 16, verse 20, where he says, and the God of peace will crush Satan under your feet shortly. And I'm just astounded by the fact that it's his peace that crushes the enemy. It's his peace that crushes the chaos and the disorder. And I'm so grateful that we don't have to fight this on our own. Like, it is not about flesh and blood. It is spiritual. And that when we just step into his peace, he will contend with that which contends with us, and he will save our children. And so I'm just very grateful for the Torah portion today. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. Well, I'm sure that if we stayed here, we could find some other things to talk about, but I'm whooped. So I'm going to, if you're with your permission, I'm going to call it a day. That doesn't mean we have to run off, but we're going to conclude this part of our day. Brother, would you feel comfortable in leading us in prayer to conclude this day and just ask the Father to be watchful over everybody and to seal what we've experienced today? Let's all stand.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we could gather today as fellow believers in you and the work that you've done in our lives. And we thank you for all that have traveled here today and those who are traveling afterwards. We pray that you would deliver us safely to our destination. We thank you for the message today and the truth that has been revealed for those that have shared. And I thank you personally for this time that I could be here together with family and friends for this whole week. And I pray that you be with my uncle who is battling cancer as we speak. I pray that you would heal him. I pray, Lord God, that you would heal those who are suffering with pain or disease right now. And I thank you for this fellowship who has welcomed us here today, and all the other visitors. And I just pray that you would bless this fellowship, that you would continue to work through Bill and his family and all those who are here. I pray for those who are going to be here tomorrow to do work on this building. And I do pray, Lord God, that you would just continue to grow this fellowship so that they can remove this wall and that they can get the things done with this building that they need to allow more believers and more people of your body to join. And we just give you all the honor, glory, and praise. In Yeshua's mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen and amen. You don't have to run off, but everybody have a great week. Hebrew class Tuesday night. Wednesday night we'll have a midweek meeting once again, and I'm sure that you'll be getting an email that discusses all of those particulars, all right? A week from tomorrow. A week from
This is the way you shall be blessed from day to day. He'll be your rest. May the Lord bless and keep you. May His grace and His face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And give you peace. May the Lord bless and keep you. May His grace and His face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And give you peace. Give you peace. Give you peace. Yes, give you peace.
When the silence of the night is lingering,